Hi, I'm Aldo. Welcome to Plays the Thing, channel where I share my experiences prepping and playing tabletop role-playing games, and this is the third development log for Heroes Unbound, the superhero role-playing game that I've been writing for almost a year now. In the first video, I talked about situations and how they drive play. Second video, I covered aptitudes, resistances, and distinctions. This video is going to be about powers, which is pretty important for a superhero game. Like other attributes, powers have dice ratings. However, they differ from aptitudes and resistances in that these dice ratings aren't capped at 5 dice. Powers are also the most complex attribute in Heroes Unbound, and that's because every single power has 2 essential elements that work together. The first of these elements is the fictional element, and the second is the mechanical element. And you can't have a power without defining both. Fictional elements are how you describe and imagine the power working in the world, and the more specific and flavorful that you can be about this, the better. Think about fire-based powers, for example. You could have fire-based powers called crystal flames that manifest as crystalline fire that sings when it burns. You could also define similar powers as Hellfire Command, which could be demonic flames that terrify onlookers. And you could also go with something called Thermal Burst, which might be pure heat energy that leaves no smoke or ash. These aren't just cosmetic differences, these are fundamentally different powers with different implications for what they can and cannot do. Key to this is that fictional elements provide narrative permissions that require no dice rolls. For example, all of the aforementioned powers would allow you to illuminate a dark room or to set objects ablaze, but only one of them, crystal flames, would allow you to create beautiful refracting light patterns. And it's important to emphasize that the power allows you to do all of those things without rolling the dice. They make fictional sense because of how you describe the power, so they just happen unless the game master decides that there's a mitigating factor that says otherwise. Same with a water-based attack power. You'd be able to use such a power to wash things clean, cause electrical shorts, or extinguish fires without rolling dice. The fiction does the work. Mechanical elements are the system rules. They determine how your power works when you actually need to roll. In other words, they're the specific rules that define how your powers function in the game. And there are a lot of them. Attack, barrier, control, domination, form, healing, physical defense, super might, super speed, and teleportation are just a few, and between them, you should be able to define just about any power imaginable. So again, pair a fictional element with a mechanical element, and you've got a power. You record it on your character sheet like this. In this example, Earth Mastery is the fictional element, what the power is, and Control is the mechanical element, how it works in the game. Most powers are very specialized, but some are incredibly versatile. Control and Form are amongst the most flexible, and let me focus on Control to show you exactly what I mean. The power Earth Mastery, Control, allows you to do the following: attack with earth and stone, defend with barriers of rock, move by surfing on stone or creating platforms. It would also grant you telekinetic control of earth, the ability to create constructs like walls or pillars or shelters, and the ability to vary the hardness or softness of stone. So Control is genuinely flexible. However, most of the abilities that I just mentioned operate on a baseline progression. When you use Control to lift something, for example, you're using the lifting capacity that you use for regular might. 1 die is equal to 50 kilograms, 2 dice is equal to 100 kilograms, 3 dice is equal to 200. It scales, but it scales somewhat slowly. However, if you take a specialized power like Telekinesis, you're lifting a ton at 1 die, 2 tons at 2 dice, 4 tons at 3 dice. So Telekinesis escalates much faster. The same thing with movement. Earth Control lets you move on rock slides at a speed of 8 kilometers per hour per die. But if you take a specialized power like winged flight movement, you're starting at 40 kilometers per hour and doubling from there. So winged flight movement 3D lets you soar through the air at 160 kilometers per hour, which is pretty darn super. So versatile powers like control give you flexibility across many functions. Specialized powers like attack or telekinesis give you superior performance in focused areas. And it's often good to have both due to the way that combat works in Heroes Unbound, but that's a topic for another video. One more thing about powers in Heroes Unbound. They can be modified by advantages and limitations. Advantages enhance a power's capabilities or expand its functionality. And once you add an advantage to a power, that advantage is always active. You can't, for example, take an area effect fire blast and use it as a single target power. Limitations constrain a power or create drawbacks. And those are the basics. So to recap, powers have fictional elements that describe what they are. They have mechanical elements that define how they work. They're not capped at 5 dice. They can be modified with advantages and limitations, and they operate on a fiction-first principle. That's what makes powers work in Heroes Unbound, and that's it for today. If you find Heroes Unbound and the play reports that I post on this channel interesting, please consider liking the video, subscribing to the channel, and clicking the bell icon to ensure that you catch my next offering. Meantime, thank you for watching, and as always, wish you good health, I wish you good cheer, I wish you good gaming. Goodbye.